A very good afternoon to one and all present here. We have here in our midst academicians, educators, school leaders, and even parents and those associated with the education sector in some way or the other, wanting to know more about the digital approach to teaching and learning in today's ecosystem that we've all landed ourselves in. I'm actually very happy that we are doing this workshop as an online workshop for this particular topic and are not engaging in a face-to-face workshop. So let's just continue from here. I am going to be doing a screen share, and I would request you to just put in the chat box if you can see my screen. And in case you can't, you could also share that with me and say that you can't see the screen. Well, this is a live and an interactive workshop. So I hope you are ready with your pen and paper. And you are requested to put in your thoughts into the chat box as and when we are progressing. It's very nice to be in a dynamic and a live education ecosystem where everybody is collaborating and wanting to do better. This is such a wonderful space that we are all in, because this is one sector where the teacher always wishes that her student and the next generation is better. So it's not competition. There's something very, very different in this space. On that welcoming note, I want to take you through the focus. Our focus today is the digital learning space. Well, we as educators have affected the environment around, and the environment has had an effect on us. And that's a beautiful symbiotic relationship in which we all are. And this has been a natural process over the years. So if I really have to take you back to how this whole space developed, I'll take you back actually to the cavemen. And the cave paintings that they had left behind were actually teachings, where even today we have anthropologists and students in universities all over the world, in schools, wanting to learn about what were those teachings that they left behind with the tools that they had then. And I'll quickly fast forward you to the next visual, which you can see, and that's the Gurukul system. Well, this is actually a fast forward to 5000 BC, when the Gurukul system of education came into existence, essentially a residential type, where there was a guru, that's a teacher, and very few students. Of course, it was a residential type of education, and only very few were privy to this education. So even if there were students who had access, wanted to learn, they were unable to get the teacher. And then let's quickly fast forward, and then we know that there were grammar schools that came up and public schools that came up, and very much into the 1600s, we had a different model of education that came up, which is what we call as the school. And the foundations of this were laid by none other than Horace Mann. And he was the one who realized that when industrialization was happening, which was actually a result of education, there was a need for mass education. And there was a need for schools to actually prepare students so that they could be fitted into the industrialized world, and that they could get into factories and they could have the skill set to work in factories. So the school system essentially was nothing else but what was called as the factory model of education. And then from this model evolved some developments, some more technological advancements, and you had the radio and the television came into existence. So with these developments, they became tools to reach even a larger section of the student community. And then we are aware how correspondence courses came into being, and we are also aware of distance learning that came in. But here was a medium that was available to educators. Understand, this medium that they had was actually limiting their ability to understand the education system, because it was not a live interaction. the teachers were actually unable to understand what their learning outcomes were through, just a one-way kind of a communication. And so education innovation kept happening and distance education came into existence. And then there was a blended form that was there. There were flipped classrooms where you see technology was developing and teachers would actually ask students to do a lot of work at home and they would get back to school to solve problems, and the teacher would save time and students had access to better learning outcomes. A little later, as this technology kept developing, we had the emergence of what are called as MOOCs, or the massive, these were the open online courses, and online actually teaching started. So the actual development happened somewhere around 2008, and the first MOOC, which was from Stanford University, actually came in on 2011. And then we had in 2012, which was actually now gone down in history already as the year of education revolution, where MIT and Harvard University came together, and then they actually formed edX, and you had courses that were being spread to people all across the world. And here you had some of us, I was also the privileged one, who could jump the bandwagon and get on to this training. I got certified. And from 2011, the IB, which had partnered Project Zero of the Harvard School of Education, we started doing online training for teachers. And then, of course, the online teaching and the learning platform started developing and developing and developing till finally we came on to where we are today. And in 2020, an interesting thing happened. After 34 years, we had the new education policy document 2020 in India. And this, as we all know, has revolutionized the way the future of education in India is set to come about. Okay, so those of us who have read the document, you are already aware that there is a big focus on teacher education. There is a very big focus on how a teacher is required to be a techno teacher, so that by 2030, we have teachers getting into classrooms which are smart classes and teaching in schools that are technology enabled schools. And the government in the document has also mentioned very clearly that the GDP percentage that goes to education will be raised from 3% to 6%. And we're going to have another 3 crore students getting into mainstream education. So beyond just increasing the access, there is also going to be a thrust on quality education, and none other than teachers, educators, academicians, and school leaders are going to be at the center of this teaching and learning that is to happen. So I'm glad you're all here. So let's welcome all of you to this new world. And in this new digital world, you need a different set. We need a different approach to teaching and learning. So you essentially want to understand what are these approaches to teaching and learning. So approaches, if you see, are basically very deliberate strategies. These are ideas, these are attitudes that permeate into the teaching learning ecosystem. We call them ATT and ATL, approaches to teaching and approaches to learning. So the approaches to learning are essentially looking at education of the student in terms of not what he or she knows, but how they learn what they learn. And which basically means that it becomes very important for teachers to just go beyond imparting education through knowledge, and that's not education anymore. And also, while you are working towards developing certain attitudes which would make them future ready, there are certain skills that need to be developed through the teaching learning process itself. And here I want to ask all of you to use the chat window to enumerate the skills, list the skills that you can just think of, so that students need to develop to become learners for life. I am going to look at the chat window, and you can just think of the skills that you think we need to develop in our students so that they become learners for life. Yes. Please use the chat window that you have there with you. Yes, I can see there are fantastic. I love the way each one of you is putting in whatever you can. Just don't worry if what you have written is something else that has been written by someone else. It's absolutely fine. Great. This is fantastic. I can just see that the chat is just going berserk with so much of information from all of you. That's what collaborative learning is all about. This is great. This is simply great. Yeah. Thank you so much for that response. We have tried, or rather still trying to put it together because there's so much still coming in. Wow, this is simply fantastic. Okay, now here's the thing about digital learning. While all of you are writing, there are others who are able to see what the others are writing. So each one is a learner in the process. We are learning with each other, and we are also learning from each other. Okay, I'm going to leave you here with this particular activity. Some of you may still want to write something. You're giving it a thought, and you still want to put down something. Please feel comfortable to continue, while I just want to sum it up for you. So here we are. You've got a tall order there, teacher, educator, and academician, school leader, to get a future ready, a learner who's ready to take on the world. And I love this creative that Matific has made over here, which just sums it up. So there are, we're looking for thinking skills, critical thinking skills, creativity, innovation, transfer skills, self-management skills. We want emotional skills, we want risk takers. Yes, we are working towards developing research skills, social skills, communication skills. Yes, this is indeed a tall order. And as teachers, it's not going to be an easy task to get this future-ready learner in place all on your own. And that's exactly why you would be requiring tools. You would require an exogenous environment. You would need to interact with the entire ecosystem. You would also need all stakeholders to be on board so that you can take your promise and ahead and make it a reality. Yeah. I now just want to share with you what exactly we mean by saying e-learning. Okay, so we brought you till 2020, which is, when the NEP came about. But at that time, we've also been going through a lot of disruptions. These disruptions, of course, have been caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. And the COVID-19 pandemic actually has been responsible for not only widening the gap which existed pre-pandemic between those who had access to quality education as those who didn't, but it also deepened the bridge, which was already a cracked one. So there were these wide and deep gaps that came in the teaching learning process. And there were school closures, not only in the less developed countries, but even in the developed countries and all over the world. There was a lot of uncertainty about how students would go back, when they would go back to school, and when the face-to-face interaction would happen. People were not sure as to what tools they had at that time. Our teachers were also not qualified enough to work on new academic inputs that were coming to them, which expected them to get on an e-learning platform. So they really didn't have those skills. But it was at that time that all the teachers actually across the board put in their best foot forward and have moved up to face the challenge that the COVID-19 pandemic brought in. Zoom platforms were there, Google Teams came up, we know that there was Vedantu, we are also aware about Blackboard and many other such online teaching learning platforms came to the rescue. At the same time, the new economic policy also was kicked in, and there's a focus on teacher education. And that's why we had more and more online virtual courses happening so that people could all come together, work together to actually try and bridge the gap that is widened, the gap that had deepened, where access to education was just not available to our students. So on the digital space, which is the online space, what was it that we have? What are the positives? And how does this digital space help and support the approaches to teaching and learning is something that I now want to share with you. And the very first one I've written is, there's access to learning. So when schools stopped working, physical schools stopped, they closed their doors, students were all left at home. This is when there was a wide number of students, a large number of population across the world that actually got access to learning, which they would not have had. And there was a lot of online learning and teaching also that suddenly started happening when we started seeing how best we could deliver our classes coming on to this online space. So the online space actually made available and access to learning in COVID times. Taking you a little beyond that, a lot of tech tools also started coming up. There were technological products in education which existed, but suddenly we found that there were a lot of these that came, and they started making it easier for teachers so that they could use the multimodal learning through which students and teachers could interact with the medium easily. I want you to have a look at the screen now. Are we all ready? Could we just have someone raise hands and say, yes, we are ready? Oh, great, thank you. So here we have on the screen on the left side is an example of a berry, a fruit. That's the brinjal, right? I'm sure at some point you're dying to write in the chat window, did she say berry and did she say fruit? Isn't it a vegetable? So because we have access to Google now, you will have teachers who are teaching mathematics or teaching any other subject, actually integrating information and knowledge from other subjects, because the minute you go on to the web tool, there's so much of information that's available for you to take and use in your class. So yes, this is a berry and it is a fruit, what we commonly call as a brinjal or an eggplant or an aubergine. And while the teacher is sharing this in class, just the way I am, with all of you, and many of you already know about it, the student is also learning through his or their sensory organs. Much of what they see, much of what they hear, and much of what they interact with the medium is how they are actually learning in the digital space. So clearly, when they're looking at it, even without telling, the student is aware now that there are varieties of brinjals other than the one that he's probably seen, because these tech tools are actually using what is happening in the real world. So that's the connect that education is making. There are no pink brinjals yet, none genetically modified. So this is how it is. And without the teacher telling the student why it's called an eggplant, I'm sure the student is already thinking, I need to find this out. Why is it an eggplant? And somewhere the student gets this little hint from the white ones here. Although deliberately in this particular visual, the shape remains like this, although if you go out and see, you will find that the eggplant would very much resemble an egg that is hanging from a brinjal tree. And then the teacher here further can actually use just a visual to make multiple connections beyond just, one and many, teaching colors from here. So teaching varieties from here. Some are small, some are big, some are long. There are shapes that can be taught over here. And for the slightly senior ones, you can teach fractions. For example, there are just 4 white brinjals here. So it's what fraction of the total. And then they're easily able to count and write. So there's a lot that can go on from the visual interaction that the students are having with the medium. I'm actually going to use this very same example to explain the 3-act problem-solving method in mathematics. Some of you must be wondering, why am I actually going to the brinjal example? I mean, why brinjal of all the things? No, it's not that I particularly like it, but I just thought I should share this one. So it's nothing to do with any personal likes and dislikes on this particular one. Okay, so I want to take you through here. Let's just take this and extend it to a class which is say doing something related to say probability, because we are on a Matific platform and I'm looking at math, but you could use it for any other subject as well. So right in the beginning, this is how we are going to make visual thinking happen in our classrooms. At the very outset, understand what is there. So when they see this particular picture, and if you are going to teach probability, that is a possibility, the first round, the students are only looking at either a video or the photograph that you have shown. Give them time to think, let them understand the context. You will find that the inquiry, which is the question that you want to ask, can also come from the students. It doesn't necessarily need to be a guided inquiry, whereas teachers, we are asking questions and students are answering. So if you just put the word probability there, you will have a student interpreting this question by looking at the visual and saying, probably from here, I probably want to know why that one brinjal is out and the rest are all together. So probably I want to find out what is the probability of pulling out one brinjal from this whole variety of 4, 3, and 2 different colored brinjals. Yes. And so they would come up with the question, let them think about it and let them share thoughts. So that's when you can have a think, pair, and share kind of a thing. They discuss it. Is this possible in online spaces? Yes. You have platforms where you can have chats, different chats. You have platforms where you can have learning engagements for groups. So you can just have, have pairs and give them dedicated activity where they can, while you are teaching online, engage and write whatever they want to write. As a facilitator, as a teacher, you have access to actually see what all the groups are doing. And the students also can get access to see what the others are doing, but that will be dependent on you. And later in the third round, let them actually come up with how they have worked out their solutions. And as a teacher, you would not be giving out the answer, but you would be listening to ideas. You would be listening and getting in all the answers. And then you would actually be sharing the correct answer. At this point, you've already started the student engagement of thought. And the student is wondering, why is it that my answer or the way I was thinking is not actually mapping the real world scenario or the real world outcome? And since they're working in pairs, there's a lot of PAL, that's peer assisted learning that is happening. And since they have the online platform, like we are here sharing what is and what is not on chat windows, they can ask their questions. So a lot of students who would otherwise not want to ask questions because they are shy would now have that liberty or the freedom to do so. So this is how a problem-solving strategy can happen. It can happen even in a subject which is either English or geography or economics or any other subject. But the idea is the thinking goal, where you're looking at developing thinking skills for your students. Next. Other than just, allowing students to interact, allowing them to engage and making learning visible and making sense of the learning. The digital platform also allows a teacher to get a quicker feedback of the teacher's learning and the teacher's teaching. So what have you learned when you've taught your students? Have they understood or not? And here we have a poll that's coming up for you. Okay, now the poll is here. Do we really need textbooks? Either you say yes or no, or you say undecided, maybe. You have three options, and this is an opinion poll. So very quickly, I'm going to request you to either click on yes, say no, or undecided, maybe. And soon we are going to get the results of the poll. So I still have many of them who are answering. Yes, I think we have a few minutes, no, seconds more to go. Few more seconds to go. Okay. You just need to put in a single choice, please. Do we really need textbooks? Okay. So now that we've got 100% of them who've answered, I think it's 50% say, yes, we really need textbooks. There's another 35% that's saying, no, we don't need textbooks. And we have 15% who are undecided. Now, here's the interesting thing. This is a digital platform that's allowing you actually to get quick results. Like this particular opinion poll that we had, we can actually have similar kind of quick or very high frequency, low engagement interaction with students from time to time. It's going to keep the students alive and awake in class. Also understand that as a teacher in a face-to-face class, if you ask the students, so how many of you think this is the correct answer? And you'll have few hands raised, and you'll have few hands who not raised. So as a teacher, you would think the others who've not raised their hands don't know the answer. But in online space, you have the third option where here you have participants who've also put in undecided. And it is these undecided or the maybe students who know a little bit and who don't know a little bit and need different kind of scaffolding, different kind of guidance. A teacher then can focus on them. So that's the kind of power that is there here. Okay. Yeah. Do we have any questions still here? Thank you all for participating in this particular exercise. And the thing about this digital approach to teaching and learning is that you are in a position to understand where you can support a student. Okay. The next one I'm coming on to is part learning. And that's something very interesting that is there in the digital approach. So as a teacher, you would probably be delivering a class, either recording it and then putting it up on, say, YouTube. You may have a YouTube channel, or you could use Vimeo, or if there are schools that have already got systems, the learning management systems in place, like the Matific. So these classes that you are actually delivering can be put up there. Now, the important thing here is that when that happens, there are some students in class in a face-to-face interaction who have not followed in totality what you've been teaching. Now, these students have access to pacing their learning. They can even repeatedly go back to the recording and they can have better learning outcomes. So that's the kind of control over the learning environment that both educators as well as students have in this digital space. Also, while you are actually online and teaching, or even if you are in a face-to-face class, you see, you can still use the digital tools that are available. So for example, it's proven that part teaching and part learning has better retention. So after maybe 7 to 8 or 10 minutes into your class, what you can do is you could just stop and you can have flashcards. These flashcards are for conceptual understanding, which basically means that these cards are available online, and it would have a definition, and the student would actually click on the right answer or the wrong answer, and then there's a flip which tells you what the right answer is. So the students are able to learn at certain intervals of time and progress. So here in a face-to-face class, it's very difficult for a single teacher to be teaching to the whole class. Either if you're teaching to the top of the class, then you'll have some of the students not paying attention, or you're teaching to the weaker students, then the students in the middle are actually lost because they lose interest. So here you have got different types of tools that you can use while you are teaching. So whether they're flashcards or you want to do some, say, scaffolding or some stepped up approach, then you could also use, say, Quizlet. So you have a little quiz, and students love to interact to find out, because the curiosity and the inquisitiveness is there in learners. There's Kahoot, which is another Kahoot, which is another online platform, a tool which is available, where you can design. They already have some ready-made live sessions available, and you can also have them do it later as homework. So it's possible to not have only live sessions. They could also work at home, and it's available for them later. There are pop-up questions which can be used. There are exit polls that are there, where at the end of the class you can find out what they've understood, what they haven't understood. So there are a whole lot of digital tools that are there in your toolkit to use to make learning more effective and to make learning more dynamic. I want to take you through another approach, and that's collaborative learning practices. So collaboration is coming together. It's about teamwork. Oftentimes people have said, when there is collaborative learning happening, you really don't know if all the students are learning or not. And that can happen in a classroom where it's a face-to-face class. It can also happen when you're online. But what you need to understand is that there are different tools that we need to use so that it becomes more effective. I want to share with you this visual. And once again, in your chat boxes, I would like you to just put in a question that you think can come up because of this one. By showing this visual, just share with me a question that you think is to be asked to a student or a class when you look at this. Is it related to golf? Is it related to colors? Whatever you're thinking, you could just write it down. Is it related to shapes? Okay. All right. So look at this. This is actually a still from a video game that is available to teach quadrilaterals. I can't run the video game here today because it's a good 4 to 5 minute video game. But at the end, I'm sure Matific will share with you some links where you can actually go and check how these games are played. And so for a student of class 6, it's a story or a lesson on the quadrilaterals. Look at the way the colors are used, because they're so distinct that you can actually identify every different quadrilateral, be it a square or a rhombus or a parallelogram or a rectangle. Just look at the way that they have put it. And the students actually play this interactive game in groups. So it's a stack game where the students are playing the game. Some properties of these quadrilaterals are, narrated, or they are shared by the teacher, or they come on the screen, and the students identify the quadrilateral. The golf ball goes and hits it if it's right, and it goes into the hole. So it's actually a beautiful way of, playing a game, earning points, and learning. So that's the kind of interaction that is there. And I assure you that many teachers who must be thinking that, it's very time consuming. Well, in today's workshop, 4 minutes because would look like a little more time, but in your class, that is a class for teaching quadrilaterals, that would be a wonderful time to spend to get a concept clear, a context very, very clear to students. So this is how powerful, you have the tool of technology, and it's up to you to leverage it now. Okay. I've told you so many good things about the digital platform. Yes, I love maths. Yes, I enjoyed an enriching experience all through in the digital world. It's been full of roller coaster rides for us as well, because we've been learners. This digital approach to teaching and learning has shifted the focus from teacher-centric education to a learner-centric education, to a learner-driven education, which is what many of us were talking about before the pandemic set in, and we stopped the face-to-face classes. But now it's a technology-enabled education in which the teacher, the student, the parent, the education leaders, your coordinators, your heads of school, everybody is a learner in the process. Yes. And while my interaction happened during this pandemic with teachers and academicians in schools across the breadth and the length of India, I faced a number of questions from teachers who were actually doing online teaching. And some of the challenges, I've put them over here so that I address them, because I actually sat and I reflected and I said, this is a yes, and this is a yes, and this is a yes, and this is a yes. So I picked up 4 challenges and I'm going to share them with you. And if there are any more challenges that any of you are facing, I'm going to request you to again put it in the chat box, or later we can have a question and answer session over a cup of coffee as a coffee session and discuss this. I'm happy to do that. So the very first one is the mask of anonymity, and teachers have often complained and been very frustrated because they feel that they are teaching, that they are putting in their time from home, and they're not sure whether students are actively engaged in the class because some of them are on mute, some of them have switched off their videos, and some of them they feel may even be off the radar of the class. So there is that mask of anonymity. And so how does one address it? And here is a possible way of going around this challenge. So one of the reasons why students actually feel that they are anonymous and is because there is a lack of engagement. And because there is a lack of engagement, then they have a lack of social commitment in class. There is a change in the social behavior, and you generally find that they are alienated, because if they're missing the class one day, then the next day they're not really interested in actually finding out what's happening in the class because they've been left behind. So the teachers are not wrong. Yes, it does happen, but it's also happening because the educators have not been empowered, I would say, with the right tools to use at the right time. Now, in a face-to-face class that you have for about 50 minutes, is it possible for you to just think and, from your experience, or maybe if you've read somewhere, put in the chat box, how much time do you think students actually focus in a class? Or what is the attention span for students to focus in a class? Could we just have a number? Is it 5 minutes? Is it 7 minutes? Is it 10 minutes? Is it 1 hour? And I'm looking at school students because, those who are into the engineering college, or if they are, studying for medicine, then they put in long hours. But we're looking at school students right now. And if you could just put in the chat box, how many hours do you think, or how many minutes do you think students can actually concentrate? And there are studies that have done, and I'm going to share the answer with you. So is it possible for us to use the chat box for this? Okay, 30 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes, half an hour, 35 minutes, 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 5 minutes, depends. In the primary, 8 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. Again, they're saying dependence on the teacher. Oh, there are lots of depends. Yes, and yes, someone says it could even be 15 to 20 seconds. And they're saying maximum of 25. Yes. I'm going to let you all have a look at the chat box to see how everyone else is writing. There's someone who's written 40 minutes in my class because I use different methods to keep them engaged. And yes, someone has said that, you see, 40% of the students are not paying attention and disturbing the others. So it's like 80% of the students who are now not, in my class. So it's the 40 who are responsible for the other 40. If someone has, someone has written, don't spend more than 40 minutes. Okay, it says it depends on the subject. Oh, wow, great. Yes. So, yeah. All right. And here is what it is. Studies have shown that no more than 25 minutes maximum is the amount of time that, students in a very well-designed, executed, disciplined class, a good teacher, no more than 25 minutes is the time that students can actually focus in a class. So this mask of anonymity can actually be taken out if we model our class in such a way that there are different activities and that no more than 25 minutes are spent, just hammering in concepts or something. So have a change of activity. There are so many different tools available to engage the students. So you could do that and let the students get into independent learning. Let them spend some time on reflection. It's not necessary to do a lot. So it's not really quantity that we are looking at now, but the focus is on the quality of what they are actually imbibing and learning. And the next one is about group dynamics. And, because of children working and sitting at home and working from home, their social skills, their emotional skills have got affected. And this is what studies have revealed. There's one study by McKinsey that says that, you see, because of remote learning, the students' learning has been pushed back to at least 4 months for mathematics and 3 months for, verbal reasoning and aptitude. And yes, it's at least that much, because there would be some students who've even lost a year, and there would be some students who've lost less than 4 months, depending on the access that they have had. Now, when we're looking at group dynamics, then how can students then interact with each other socially? How is it possible for this medium to make that happen? Well, students have got different ways of interacting with each other. The group dynamics can happen in classrooms, where you have platforms such as a Moodle platform, for example, where we actually set up what are called as discussion groups. And you will be surprised to see the quality of discussion that goes on in these discussion groups is far better than the one that actually happens in a face-to-face class. And I am going to say yes to this because I've myself seen both sides of the world. So in a class, when there is a class discussion, there's more of noise coming in from everywhere. Now, this is what doesn't happen in platforms that allow you to have different group discussions happening. And they're there even after the discussion is over for others to look at different perspectives of a particular lesson or the way students have approached a topic. It could be a Socratic seminar. It could also be, working together. If you're, for example, looking at, say, teaching triangles, you have what is called as a jigsaw wiki, in which you have one team that is only going to look at acute angle triangles, another one that's looking only at obtuse angle triangles, another one that's looking at a right angle triangle. And all the team members put in their thoughts, ideas to form a so-called topic data. And then they are like experts over there, and everybody has access to that. So there's so much of learning that's happening from exchange, and that's the kind of group dynamics that we are looking at. Interestingly, on this particular platform, like in any other platform, we have the good, bad, and the ugly. And this is often said, how do I choose? There's so much of content. So here's something that I want to share with you. Choose wisely, and obviously choose the good. And here are some tips from my experience and from my interaction with others who are working in the digital space. So firstly, to choose wisely, you need to see, is the content that is available from an authorized or an authenticated source? Okay, is it a safe source? Secondly, you've got to see, is it mapping the curriculum? For example, if you're teaching in a CBSE school, now it needs to map the NEP 2020. So if you still have content online which is not mapping what is happening in the real world, then that's not really good to choose. The third thing is, does it lend itself and align itself to education, teaching, pedagogy? Is it in context? Does it have reference to the age? Is it age appropriate? Is it culture appropriate? Because there's no point, being here in India and telling the students about, say, dandelion or something which is not even happening here, when you can simply say there are 10 sunflowers. So just make see that the content which is there has a context to which a student can relate. And finally, I want to tell you about the ugly part. There are third-party hosting video sites. Now, these video sites are not responsible for the content that comes onto the site. And this is a void situation. So teachers need to be very diligent when they choose the sites, because there could be low integrity content over there, and we don't really want to let our students go there. So that's how you could just choose. There are sites and platforms, online platforms, that are certified. So those are the ones that you need to see, and then you can ask students to choose from there. So that's something that I wanted to share about the challenges. And finally, the last one is related to assessments. Now, in online teaching and learning, if as teachers, we teach and we assess learning the way we did in a face-to-face class or in a face-to-face situation or in an in-school environment, we are going to fail. This is a new medium. This is a new environment. You really cannot play cricket with golf sticks, right? So we've got to adapt ourselves. There has got to be a change in the mindset, in the way we conduct the assessments in themselves. For example, you can have more of formative assessment. There are tools which allow to assess learning immediately at the end of a class. And the tools are also giving you the results, just like the way you saw in the online poll. So much of your correction work is also being done. There's online correction that happens. There are annotation tools, so you don't even need to write effective evaluation. There's already an annotation tool which says EE, and all you need to do is pick that up and put it there. And at the end, it says, okay, so this whole thing of 2 pages is effective evaluation. So they've made it so simple. It's just up to us to use the medium, use the tools. The other thing is, oftentimes, teachers have been saying that, when I give an assessment to them, I really don't know if there's collaboration happening, if there's plagiarism happening, if students are cheating and copying from each other, or if they're getting the work done by somebody else. And that's why in this particular space now, there is a need for academic honesty policy for a whole school. I have visited a number of school websites and seen that not many of them have it there. I want to ask you to just reflect and look at the academic honesty and integrity part of this entire ecosystem, because that's what's going to help us to cultivate an ethos of learning. Do you have in your school a whole school academic honesty policy, which is available on the school website? And if yes, is it updated? So this is a point for you to reflect, to go back to your schools, discuss in your staff rooms or discuss with your academic heads. And where exactly is this policy? If it is in the school calendar, it's no more applicable for everyone now, because now the environment is all stakeholders together are participating in this teaching learning, right? So even at home, you've got to inform parents that students need to have dedicated learning spaces. The drawing room or say the dining room is not really the right place where a student should be sitting and studying. I understand that their homes would be small, but they still need to have dedicated spaces that they call would be like my little table and chair for studying. Otherwise, they're only going to be thinking of food. And if they are in their bedrooms and sitting on top of the bed and working, then it's going to be, what's the next to do? I need a snooze. So to get them away from all of that, it's important to have dedicated spaces. See that in your school policies, there are a number of things which are made known to all stakeholders, including parents. As teachers, what checks and balances do you possess in your toolkit for plagiarism or for collaborative practices which are beyond permitted bounds? By beyond permitted bounds, I mean, for assessments, we have what are called as OBAs. Those are open book assessments. So in online spaces, you can give them access to their textbooks, but then you limit the time. So in that much time, in a certain dedicated time, they're supposed to finish an assignment. And that means that they really don't have time to read, to understand, and then to write. So you're expecting that they are prepared for the assignment, and you're still giving them the opportunity. It's an open book assignment. So that's what I meant by permitted bounds. There is, again, a tool, and it's known as www.turnitin.com. Here, this is a software in which you can put your students' work, and it reveals immediately the percentage of matches that are there to indicate if there has been plagiarism or indicates if there has been any collaborative practice that has happened in class. So these are some things that I wanted to share in the webinar. There are many more, but these were some things that I wanted to highlight. And I definitely want you to go back understanding that the objective of today's interactive session was actually to encourage educators and school leaders to understand that we are all learning in a new and a different context, and that we have the tools now available for us to leverage and for us to make learning effective, for us to have transformative experiences so that we can transform the experience for our students. Yes, as you saw, whether it's content or whether it's a concept or whether it's a context or skills or an inquiry, which is just questions, they can all be integrated by leveraging the technology tools and products that are available at our disposal. We are now open and we have entered a wider education ecosystem, which is here to develop a culture of learning. And this is an ecosystem that actually embraces the development of the 21st century skills, be they critical thinking skills, be they innovation or innovative skills or research skills, or whatever skills that you have put up there, and learner agency so that they take hold and understand that learning is for life so that they can apply it to different situations in their life. And ultimately, we are now here in an environment which is safe for our students to grapple, to wonder, to inquire, to discuss, and to play. And basically, let our students say that if learning is fun, that's what people say, it is fun for me too. So on that note, I just want to end with a word of thanks and gratitude to all the participants who are present in today's webinar. You've made time on a weekend to spend this hour over here. I also want to thank Matific for inviting me, and also Matific based in Australia for organizing this free certification webinar ahead of the International Day of Education. That's on the 24th of January. Thank you very much, Zena, for all the tech support all through the webinar.